Greetings, everyone. I am Tom Earl. On this week's episode, we have artist, activist, and troublemaker, Irmina, Phoenix the Artist, L.A. Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the celebration. We know you could be anywhere. So the fact that you are here with us means the absolute world to us. As you can see, sense, hear, or feel, I am not alone. I am joined by an artist that I have the utmost respect for. An artist I think is a genius, both poetically and visually. Also, this artist is going to be our featured artist for this Sunday's live and online expression session. She goes by the name of Irmina. You may know her as Phoenix the Artist L.A. on Instagram. She is an artist, activist, and a self-proclaimed troublemaker. How's it going, Irmina?
Going well. How are you?
Good. That was a lot. I love that intro. Can you break down any of those for us that you arrived at? Artist, activist, troublemaker. If you want to go into any of those, what do they mean to you?
Absolutely. So I think the artist part of it is pretty self-explanatory.
Is it?
I'll break it down a little further for you. I think there for a long time, I was someone who drew and wrote, but I didn't consider myself an artist, and I thought that this was something that I had to get a certificate, or I had to earn. And then I thought, what, if I draw and I'm creative and I write, then I'm an artist and I should call myself as such. So that was actually a journey for me to even get to that point of calling myself an artist. And, and I also think a lot of women don't call themselves artists. They say, I just draw, I do this, whatever, but they don't call themselves an artist. And so that's why I put that first. The activist part, I think activism is a huge part of my life. I think it also drives a lot of my creative energy. And, I think that for me, being an artist is also being an activist, that I kind of see what I'm putting out into the world, hopefully as changing things for the better. And then the troublemaker part is kind of the mischievous part of being an artist. I think, you don't want to be status quo. You want to mess things up a little. You want to get people to think, and you want to interrupt the normal way of things. So that's where that comes from.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing. You said it was a journey for you to become an artist. Would you mind sharing a little bit of first of all, the art, when you say artist, what kind of art you're referring to, and a little bit about your journey, if you don't mind sharing with us?
Sure. So the art is actually right behind me.
Yay!
This is one of my pieces called Dragonfire. And I think my journey as an artist started when I was very young. I come from a family where, my mom's an artist. I have grandparents that were artists in South Asia. But as what I mentioned, I drew, but I didn't consider myself an artist. And I went through a time when I was in school that was very tough mentally and physically. And during that time, art became my outlet and the way that I coped with what was going on. And so it was during that time where I really started to think of myself as an artist and called myself as such.
So it sounds like the process of art also has some magic in it for you as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Would you mind going into a little bit about how you learn to appreciate the process and not just do it for the product?
I think, I guess to go into my artistic process, I start with a moment of inspiration or emotion. And I think, as I draw, it's more about processing that thought and that emotion. And also music is a big part of my artistic process. And so I think while I'm drawing, I'm listening to music, and I'm working through that emotion, whatever I was feeling, and I enjoy the process. It's also fun. It's not something that's like tedious and boring.
That's wonderful. And I know some folks are going to be listening rather than watching. And for those folks listening who want to see the artwork Irmina's listening to, you can watch the video at tomrell.com/Irmina. For those who are listening and not watching, could you describe what is the art behind you? How would you describe it visually?
So I would say my piece that's right behind me here, Dragonfire, or my interpretation of a tree that's on fire. But rather than the tree sort of being externally on fire, the fire is contained within the tree. And it's black and white. It sort of makes me think of duality and two extremes. And the tree itself looks like it's melting. So it's kind of like, rather than the fire being external, it's internal.
What was the thought that started the journey of that one?
So that was actually me watching Game of Thrones.
Okay.
I'm a big fan of Daenerys, shout out to Game of Thrones. And so, I was kind of watching one of the finale actually, and kind of thinking about like the idea of dragons and dragons containing fire, right? And trees are a recurring motif in my work. And so I think I sort of merged those two thoughts together.
Why are trees a reoccurring motif?
So I'm from Seattle, Washington, and I grew up around a lot of trees. So it reminds me of home, and trees are also a symbol of growth and of, they kind of tell a story just by existing.
That's wonderful. I'm from Wisconsin, so we got trees.
Yeah, I know.
You're also a poet. Am I correct in my understanding?
That is correct.
Would you be willing to introduce us to your poetic expression by sharing a poem with us?
Absolutely. So the first poem that I have is actually something I wrote like 2 years ago in honor of Martin Luther King Day. And so it goes like this. And the title of the poem is Debt. We walk in their shadow, blood running through the streets. 1,000 deep of our ancestors who paved the way to the joy of freedom that shines in the horizon. But you and I, we are not yet there. So we walk onward, joined hand in hand, singing with one voice to the promised land.
Hey, that's powerful and very timely.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that with us. When did you start writing poetry?
So I would say I started as a kid, actually. I had a great creative writing teacher, Mr. Taylor, and during that time, we were introduced to different poets, and I used to jot down little phrases, and I think around the same time that I was drawing, I actually started writing as well.
And why did it stick? Why do you think poetry stuck?
I think poetry is a lot more of the moment and on the fly. I think with drawing, you have to really finish it for people to see the full effect. And I think with poetry, you can be on a bus, you can be at work, you can be anywhere, and write something down. And to me, that really kind of captures inspiration in a very timely way.
It's deep you say that, because I think with the sharing of it too, you can share a poem with just what you have.
Right.
It lives inside of you. You don't have to bring it out and show me. That's a really deep point.
Right.
When did you transition from just writing poetry to speaking it?
Actually, I had a friend who dared me to do like a freestyle. Um, I was out with a friend in New York City. We were in Central Park, and we were feeding squirrels of all things. And my friend says, "Why don't you start, rapping about these squirrels?" And so I wrote like a poem on the fly and was freestyling about these squirrels in Central Park. I kind of said, well, if I write it, why can't I speak it?
Mm. And that was the start of it? Squirrels in
Yeah,
Central
that's the
Park?
start of it.
Did you get into slam at all, or have you mostly just sharing it?
I think open mic mainly. I think that's kind of where I started doing spoken word and where I continued to do it.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Talk to me about what are some things that you're passionate about?
So I'm very passionate about kind of being active politically, especially in this current environment. With our president, kind of working against the rights of those who are underprivileged in our society on a daily basis. I think that, and that sort of brings both my poetic side and my artistic side together.
Mm.
I think the other thing I'm passionate about is actually fashion and makeup, of all things, because I feel like that's something that brings art into daily life in a very accessible way.
Mm.
And so, it's not something that I do right now as an artist, but it's something I am passionate about. And honestly, that's it right now.
Mm.
Yeah.
What does it mean to be an activist for you personally?
I think it means struggling on behalf of those who may not be able to speak for themselves.
Mm.
I think it means if you see an injustice that you speak up in the moment, you don't wait.
Mm.
You see something wrong and you call it on its face. And I think it's really about wanting to make the world better for you having been in it.
Mm. I resonate with that. How do you measure that?
I don't think you can, but you can start with that intention
Mm.
and go from there.
Have you felt a moment where I have made this room or this relationship or this world a better place? Have you felt a moment like that?
Yeah, no, for sure. I think I actually inspired my younger brother and sister to start drawing
Hey.
again, and I think and I'm the oldest of three, and so I think when they started drawing and writing again, it sort of was like, oh, I was able to sort of bring that forth in my siblings.
Mm.
Yeah.
Earlier, you had said that you feel that a lot of people don't call themselves artists, especially women.
Mm-hmm.
Would you mind talking a little bit about that reflection?
Yeah. I think it was interesting. I went to the Getty maybe 2 months ago, and I remember going into the Getty, and and as a visual artist, I was obviously checking out all the great art. They were all done by men, and I think visual art in particular is a very male-dominated medium, and I find that really disturbing. That a medium that is so sort of seen by so many and so culturally important that is dominated by men, and you're missing half the population. And I think so. There's that for one. I think that you don't see other female artists. You don't see other female artists' work, especially in the visual art medium. I think poetry is a little better. And I also think being an artist means that you stick to a certain vision and you stick to an aesthetic, and in some ways you are not compromising your vision and your aesthetic. And I think women daily are told that they should compromise their opinions and their aesthetic for the sake of others, especially for men. And so to be an artist is saying, no, I don't care, necessarily about other people's aesthetic and other people's vision. I care about mine. And I think as a woman, you're not taught to do that in life.
What do you think for young women or young girls who might be listening? What encouragement or words would you offer for young girls or young women who have an interest in art?
I would say, first of all, call yourself an artist. And I would say, find your inspiration in your aesthetic and stick to it. And don't let anyone tell you that you need to compromise that vision. That's
wonderful. What do you mean, pick your aesthetic and stick to it? What does that mean?
I think what that means is kind of look inside yourself and think about what comes out when you test that pen, or what appears on that paper when you draw, and being true to sort of that inner dialogue.
Do you have any women artists that you really admire or who inspire you?
Yes. There's a visual artist, Vangechi Mutu, who's I believe she's Kenyan artist, who does these amazing pieces where she paints, but she also superimposes images from magazines, from women's magazines. And a lot of her work is a critique of the way that female bodies are represented in the visual art medium. And I think that actually kind of brings me to a second thought. I think one of the other reasons visual art is very off-putting to a lot of female artists is because you see a lot of objectification of the female naked body. And I think it's kind of disturbing, that you go to an art museum and you see naked women everywhere, and while the female body is beautiful, why is it seems very, it's sort of like the male gaze made very apparent.
Because I'm guessing it's a certain type of woman's body.
Exactly. And it's not done in a very, it's always done in a very, in purely an erotic gaze sort of fashion, and not in a realistic fashion.
Would you mind sharing another poem with us?
Yes. No, I don't mind. I'll do it.
I knew what you meant.
All right. So this second poem is called Prayer. Okay. Ancient trees reach up to touch our darkening sky. Raindrops drip from arms of lush moss that drape this cathedral of stillness and silence. And I remember, with the soft ground beneath my feet, that I am but an interloper in this most holy of spaces.
Yay! That's one of those poems where I just want to ingest and reflect on each line one at a time.
Thank you.
Did you write it with that intention?
I did, yeah. I think this is actually a real place in Vancouver, British Columbia. And so I think that poem is sort of meant to immerse you in that place.
It did. Immediately, it was a lot of imagery and stuff like that.
Yeah.
What's your writing process?
So, honestly, it's very stream of consciousness. It's very of the moment. I think I wrote that poem when I just gotten back from a trip to Vancouver, British Columbia. And I was just thinking of being in that place and describing that image. And I think that's one part of the process. I think another one is if I, for example, the Martin Luther King Day poem that I wrote. And that was sort of reflecting on the day itself, and then kind of catching on that emotion that I had around that experience and just putting it to paper.
Mm. Do you write often, or do you have a writing ritual or anything like that, or do you just write when it comes to you or when you have time?
I think I can only write well when it comes to me, honestly. I think, I do sit and try to write, nightly, but the best stuff happens on the fly.
The last one we haven't talked about is troublemaker.
Yes.
What does that mean for you, a troublemaker?
I think it means, doing things slightly off center. So, for example, in my art, I'm not aiming to make something that's just pretty or that's aesthetically pleasing. It's something that maybe disturbs you a little bit, or doesn't look quite the way it should. And so it's sort of creating some, I don't know, like anarchy, a disturbance in the force. I also think with my poetry, I'm trying to sort of get you out of that rut, or that stillness that you're in. And it also has to do with my activism. I think being an activist, you're not aiming to keep things the way they are. You want to create some trouble.
What is, and you were talking about as an artist having a vision and the importance of vision. What's your vision as an activist?
I think as an activist, I think uplifting the voices of those that are marginalized and being an ally the best way I can.
So is troublemaking and off-putting towards that end, or kind of just for trouble's sake?
I think a little bit of both,
Are you a punk rocker? Did you listen to punk rock growing up?
No, I didn't. But I mean, I listen to grunge. I'm from Seattle. I don't know if that counts. But I think, gosh, what was the question again? You were asking?
Is the troublemaking towards that vision of uplifting, or is it towards just trouble for trouble's sake?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think obviously I don't want to hurt anyone.
Yeah.
But I think there is sort of a touch of rebellion in my work that kind of runs throughout my work. And in the activist sense, it is sort of troublemaking in trying to wake people up and get them to see what's going on in the world, and just things that are going on in the world. And I think as an artist, some of the troublemaking is a little bit of mischief,
Is there a difference between troublemaking as an artist and as an activist?
Yes. I think as an activist, you're sort of responsible to, or you feel responsible towards the people whose lives you're affecting with your work. And you try to be aware and respectful of that. And I think as an artist, you're a little more free. You can sort of make trouble for trouble's sake. I once, I remember I did some guerrilla art, sort of Banksy style, where I made a mock-up of dollar bills with, in U.S. Treasury. I wasn't forging anything, but I instead of United States of America, it said United Snakes of America. And then I sort of printed out these black and white like dollar bills, and I sort of put them all over like the dean's office at the school that I was at. So thank you for watching. That was me.
They're like, I knew it. Been following you ever since. I knew you'd slip up.
Right.
Question for you. I know you were saying that for you, activism is uplifting those whose voices aren't heard, or uplifting marginalized voices. And it sounds like doing it for other people. Some might say that you have identities that are marginalized. Do you experience your activism as also advocating for those aspects of yourself?
Absolutely. I think, I'm a Muslim American. That's a huge part of my identity. and the struggles that the Muslim American community has gone through since 9/11 have definitely been something that's inspired me, and is, honestly a form of self-preservation as well. And I think being an Indian Muslim in particular has been influential in my process, because we're from a country where my people aren't treated the best, and so that has been a definite inspiration. And I think just being a woman in our society, our patriarchal society, has influenced my process.
Do you notice a difference, or what is the difference, or how does it feel when you're doing activism or art that's advocating for an identity that you're a part of versus one that you're lending your voice to?
I think for when it's for other groups of people, maybe not identities that I'm affiliated with, I'm a lot more respectful to what people of that community are facing, and what they would want, and going in concert with that rather than imposing what I believe. For example, supporting a group like Black Lives Matter, not trying to inject my identity onto their process, but just being an ally and helping them whatever way I can. If it's something that they want. And I think, for example, on behalf of the Muslim community, I feel like I can be a little more, risk taking, and be more upfront with what I'm saying, just because I'm part of that group.
What role do you feel social media plays in your life for your art and activism?
I think it plays a key role. Instagram is something that has been pivotal in how I've released my art to the world. I think it makes it very easy, and it also is a source of inspiration. Obviously, it's a platform that's just images, and so I think I can look at different other artists' work. I can like their work. I can give feedback or get feedback, and I think that's been a huge part of it. And I think social media was also key in helping get my poetry out to the world. One of the first things I did as a poet was to write my own blog. I no longer write in, but I felt like it was a way that I could get my words out of just where I was in my room.
Well, I do like your Facebook, what you use Facebook for in terms of activism as well.
I think Facebook is a place where I can share news. I can have discussions with people of varying viewpoints. And I think it's also a great organizing tool. I don't think it's the only organizing tool. I think one of the pitfalls is that people think that that's where activism ends, is on social media. And that's false. You have to bring it together with in real life activism. But I think it's a great organizing tool. In, for example, we have the Women's March this Saturday, and I'm sort of getting a group together of other women, and we're going to go to the march. And I think that wouldn't have been possible without social media.
Do you want to plug that at all? I know you did briefly. Do you want to share anything else?
Yeah, sure. I think, I was at the Women's March last year, and it was an amazing experience. I think, I've gone to a lot of protests over the years, but this was one of the biggest. And I saw a lot of people that were novice activists and people who hadn't been to a march before. And I think there was a real sense of urgency that I haven't seen in other actions.
It's been a year since the Women's March?
Mm-hmm.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
I would have thought that was the summer.
No.
So it's the year anniversary, and there's another march all across the country?
Yes, and there's one here in Los Angeles in downtown, and LA was actually the site of one of the biggest marches. I think it was close to 70,000 people last year.
When we hang out, you share kind of myth busting of what they portray protests to be. Would you mind sharing some of that with us?
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. First of all, I think anyone can go to a protest. You don't have to be a college student. You don't have to be a young person. Um, you can sort of show up as yourself. And I think that a lot of people think that you have to be a certain type of stereotype to be at a protest. And not everyone has to engage in direct action. I think people think that protests are purely direct action, but there's that, and then there's also the folks who support everyone who's on the ground. I also think people think protests are sort of pointless, or why are we out there, right? And I think I think most of the protests that I've been to are done to support a direct action of some kind. And you have someone who's doing the action, you have other people supporting, and then you have other people recording. And I think you can be part of any of those.
What logistically, how do you suggest people get to and leave protests? Do you have any advice, everyday advice?
Sure. I would say take public transport if you can. If not, have a buddy. I wouldn't suggest going to it by yourself. Have at least one other person with you. And I'd say that beyond that, making sure that you have your own sign or your own message that you kind of bring with you, because the visual part of protests is pretty important. And you want to make sure you represent yourself at whatever action you're at. And I think kind of doing your research beforehand, so making sure that whatever group you're with is one that's well organized, that kind of is clear about what to expect, and what their principles and their the word that I'm searching for,
values.
Their values and what they're trying to achieve. And I think the other thing that people think that all protests are sort of dangerous, and I think kind of realize that, hey, if it's something you're not comfortable with, you can always leave.
Hence the public transport.
Yes,
you can just hop off anywhere in the protest and take a bus out of there.
Exactly.
Do you have your sign picked out?
No, I don't. I have to make one. I think I'm just going to make it the day before, whatever I'm feeling.
I dig it.
Yeah.
Do you have another poem you'd like to share with us to sign us off for the day?
Sure. Let me find it here.
And as you're looking for that, we want to let folks know that, as you heard at the beginning, Irmina is going to be our feature for this Sunday's live and online expression session. That's going to be Sunday, the 21st. That'll be noon Pacific Standard Time, which means if you're on the East Coast, that's 3 p.m. If you're in London, that's 8 p.m. We'd love to have you. The expression session is always a 2-hour workshop, writing workshop. We have first-time writers who have never written in their life, people who come saying, I'm not going to share, I'm not going to write. And by the end, they have a whole poem. And we'll culminate the whole experience with Irmina sharing her poetry. And we'll also get to ask her how the Women's March went. And we'll get some of that live for you. So you could register for that all at tomrell.com/Irmina or tomrell.com/events. And it's free. You can attend from anywhere in the world by phone or by video.
All right. So I got our last poem. It's called Warrior Princess. All right. And dedicated to all my ladies who have been to hell and back. She is reborn from the fire, burnt to the bone, cinders scatter, her breath boiled down to the core. She lived to tell the tale from the belly of the beast. She wears her pain proudly. Battle scars adorn her arms. She stands tall, her fist raised, aloft in victory.
Yay!
Snap, snap.
That's a perfect poem for the conversation we've been having.
Yeah.
Anything else you'd like to say either about the poem or about anything that's on your mind that you didn't have the chance to speak?
I would just say, ladies, go forth and call yourselves artists.
Yes, I like that. We agree here at the celebration. Where can folks get in touch with you to tell you how awesome they are and that they are calling themselves artists?
I think my Instagram is the best place to do that. And you can also see my art there. It's at Phoenix, the Artist L.A. Phoenix spelled normally, the Artist L.A., all one word.
Why don't you spell Phoenix? Some folks might not even know how to spell it normally.
Sure. Like the city. So it's a PHOENIX, the Artist L.A.
Can folks get in touch with you on Facebook, or do you prefer Instagram?
Instagram, direct message me, drop me a line, let me know your thoughts.
Perfect. And as I've been saying, all the show notes are tomerl.com/Irmina. That's spelled IRMINA. This has been an absolute pleasure. You're not only one of my people who I consider to be a good friend, but I really like your art. We've used your art as the writing prompt many times at the expression session. And, you're one of the first artists I've met in LA. So it's a pleasure to finally get our schedules to align to do this interview. So thank you so much, Irmina.
No problem. Likewise.
Awesome. All right, folks, as always, we're wishing you peace and blessings.